always authoritative. They did not draw a distinction between hadith and sunnah like Imam Malik and the school of Medina did. They believed in just hadith absolutism. And this kind of attitude, this approach really comes a few hundred years after the Prophet ﷺ, and then continues to solidify and gain strength. And most of the people that were on this view initially and generally were Shafi'i madhab, who believed if a hadith was sahih, it was always an authority. Now, yes, they did this in contrast with certain sectarian movements to kind of quash certain sectarian difficulties that they were facing. So some people were questioning hadith altogether, some people were coming up with certain angles, certain other sects and denominations. So the muhaddithin, the scholars of hadith, they started to reaffirm this view of hadith absolutism. And as a byproduct, you ended up with the kind of sanctification of books like Bukhari and Muslim. And people like Ibn Tahir, these people really put this into place. And then you have other muhaddithin, Ibn Salah and other people saying what is in Bukhari and Muslim is absolutely certain and conclusive, and Ibn Hajar and all these other muhaddithin who follow suit do that. But you have to see that this view of popularizing these two books was a byproduct to that phenomenon of hadith absolutism, which in its time, as the movement was rising, served a function. It was to kind of safeguard the main Orthodox Islam against certain denominations. And we see parallels in other kind of, with other movements too. So you can see things like the rise of the Tasawwuf movement, as an example. Post, 7th century Islam, it rises and then becomes almost very commonplace. With it as a byproduct, the understanding that bid'ah, there is a division of bid'ah. That bid'ah can be divided into good and bad bid'ah. I'm not saying people before did not have that view, they did. But after the rise of tasawwuf, generally, especially into the 600, 700 Hijri and onwards, this becomes the view, to the extent that only Islam is identified through this understanding. And you would think, boy, there must have never have been a time when Muslims did not accept any alternate view. Yet, prior to the 600s and the 500s, this was a minority view. So similarly, we see with the kalam phenomenon, mutakallimin, the theologians, as certain kind of views start to emerge, Muslim contact with with kind of Greek literature and other things as well, we see a rise in the whole theologian phenomenon. And Muslims, we see groups emerging, this whole thing of the Hanabila, the Asha'ira, the Maturidiyya, and these schools of theology emerge. And they emerge to safeguard Islam. But as a byproduct, you end up with dogmatism. Now we have a list of fixed dogma, and every person must believe this, and they must, and if you don't believe this, you are now no longer part of the orthodoxy of Islam. But prior to that movement, prior to this kind of phenomenon, people in the early times just believed. They didn't list out, so Imam Malik did not list out his belief. The Sahaba did not list out their beliefs, the Tabi'een did not list out their beliefs and so on. It was just kind of a natural, organic understanding of Islam. But once certain problems arose, they were met with this theologian phenomenon, the kalam kind of movement. And it was done to safeguard Islam. But as a byproduct, it ends up with this. So similarly, this hadith absolutism and the movement of the muhaddithin was done to safeguard the tradition of Islam, of mainstream Orthodox Islam, and to preserve the hadith. But as a byproduct, it ends up with the sanctification of certain books like Bukhari, and then some people start to exaggerate in this sanctification, especially of that movement. People like the absolutists, the Shafi'i school in general, and other muhaddithin, Ibn Salah and other people start to say, well, this is absolutely certain, anything that is in this book, it is conclusive. And then to the extent that other people become influenced, that they almost forget that there was a time that this was not the mainstream kind of view. And